So Lori S. asks, after both of today's webinars are concluded, can video of one or the other be made available for public sharing? Absolutely. So our website, leachateloophole.org, already hosts a webinar in our press release page from our press release back in December, and we'll be doing the same here, and we'll be sending all these materials to you, those who have signed up and beyond. So yes, we'll make sure that you get everything and more. What kind of contaminant is used for the leachate collected by a landfill? How is security of this contaminant facility assured? Is this leachate transferred by a pipe to wastewater treatment plants? Jen, would you like to take that question?
Yeah. So the containment systems require 2 layers of liners. And those are typically thick plastic liners. And then there might be like clay, impermeable clay as a supplement. The security of this, like I said before, the solid waste regulations that cover this are extensive, and we didn't study them extensively as part of this project. But I can tell you that regular routine inspections of that system are part of it, and routine cleaning of that system is part of it. And then routine sampling of the leachate itself and the groundwater around the landfill and the surface water around the landfill are part of that. As far as transfer, it can be either one. Some of the landfills have pipes that directly connect to the wastewater treatment plant. In most cases, it seems in our region, it's by truck. So you'll see those tanker trucks hauling, and some of those are hauling leachate.
Thank you, Jen. So Pam from Vermont, Pam, thanks for being here, talks about on-site treatment and I'm going to have to do a recap, Pam, because it's a long question, well, a long statement before the question, but there are concerns, there have been concerns at the Coventry landfill doing pre-treatment. So pre-treatment is not what we're asking for. Pre-treatment is actually a bureaucratic term. We're asking for on-site treatment of leachate, just to be clear. Pre-treatment and on-site are very different. But it sounds like there was a really bad outcome at this landfill. And so Pam's question is, why do you consider that on-site is the way to go, on-site treatment? I could add 10 more comments to this process. It is not the answer as it currently, it sounds like it, as it is currently being set up. So I think it's a question of why is on-site treatment of landfill at the landfill what we're proposing here. Up for grabs. Go ahead, Jen or John, Yvonne. Maybe you each want to add to this. Yvonne, why don't we start with you? And you can pass if you'd like.
Yeah, boy, I don't know if you'll like my answer, but coming from a community that was once a vibrant and healthy community, now being deemed a disadvantaged community, rife with cancer clusters far above state and national averages, I don't think the people in my community would want all of this leachate to remain on site. I guess that's why in my, I'm not disagreeing with the fact that it needs to be properly treated. But I do feel that as I mentioned, the solution is to stop using PFAS chemicals in the first place and just transition our throwaway culture into one that's a more zero waste circular economy that uses landfills as a last resort. I hope I didn't upset anybody with that answer.
No. I just want to say Jen has come off camera, but that's the whole point of opening up rulemaking, is that we can all have different opinions about what we think needs to be done in order to, to work towards solving this problem. So what we know is that the DEC has proposed rulemaking for on-site treatment and disposal of leachate at landfills. That's what the DEC has proposed. That's an opportunity for us to engage. And we're going to have 90 days, 60 days, maybe, to be able to get everybody together, rowing upstream together and responding to this. And you can provide your experience and your comments during that time. That's what we're trying to get to here, is to open that up so that you can all share your experiences and to make the best new regulations that we could hope for. Jen?
I want to, sorry, John, I'll keep it short. I want to piggyback on what Yvonne said. I skimmed Pam's question too. And we had this conversation a lot during our project, that this is a complicated problem without a silver bullet answer, and just slapping 5 or 7 or 9, however many PFAS regulations on a landfill is not a satisfactory solution here. We really need to take a step back and look at these systems as a whole, how these systems are working. And so Yvonne mentioned not using PFAS, and I would even expand that and say we need to, and this is something that is in the report, and if you're interested, you can look at the report, search for precautionary principle in there, and it'll get you the right part. We need to change in this country the way that we are studying chemicals before we approve them for use and circulation. So right now, companies can invent anything, and they don't have to do a detailed risk assessment before they're allowed to market it as safe or convenient or whatever. And that's got to change if we're gonna get a hold of this situation. There's also, as Yvonne mentioned, the issue that we noticed in our work here, which is that active landfills are generating a lot more leachate than inactive landfills. And so if we're able to reduce the number of active landfills that we have to have, then we can reduce the amount of leachate that is even being generated in the first place. So just to piggyback on what Yvonne said.
Yes, and John?
Yeah, I think you guys have covered it. I just to the question, we started our conversation with on-site treatment because, as Rebecca points out, the DEC in their statements in 2023 or 4 said we'd like to investigate on-site treatment. So we're starting at that point. In the course of the rulemaking, alternate technologies may be proposed, and they will be worth looking at. But one of the things that's important to me is that the polluter doesn't get to pass the pollution off. So the landfill is the polluter. We, society, own the landfill. We're the polluter. For the toxic material to be shunted somewhere else leads to this kind of sleight of hand. If the landfill must deal with the toxic waste, then the landfill will make every effort to reduce the toxicity and the volume of that waste, because it'll be in their best interest, in the interest of their bottom line. So we want the polluter to be responsible for the pollution from the start to the finish. They don't get to export it to some other plant, and they don't get to dump it in our waterways.
Thank you, John. So there's a quick question we can respond to about whether or not we've reached out to New York's indigenous communities to bring them into the advocacy, and the answer is yes. And I see Yvonne is also typing an answer to that. And there are different ways that indigenous tribes organize, and so it varies. And so we are working and building. We have those relationships within our work, and they're growing, and we're getting outreach, in fact, from some that are outside of the area that we're actually working in. So this building a coalition of partners is our next step. And what we hope is that everyone will use this information. Our coalition of partners will have activities to help to shape the work going forward, but you're welcome to use this information any way that you'd like within your organizations, in your communities. We hope, communities they come in different size, shapes, and et cetera, and it's important that that you organize in the way that you're comfortable. So thank you for that question. That's a great question. There's a question here about a family that's drinking, that lives in Cohoes and is concerned about their drinking water and what can they do right now to safeguard their drinking water as they're advocating for Cohoes to clean up the water system and to ensure these regulations. So I have some thoughts, but I'd love to open it up to our team. John has an
Oh,
idea.
you go, Rebecca. You're the community organizer here.
Okay, well,
Go.
I'm sorry, Keisha. I know that that's stressful, but one of the things you can do, and there might be other things that you can do, but we want to, is to put reverse osmosis in your sink. I mean, and to make sure you're testing. I mean, that's what we do for our drinking water in the short term. Because I know that's what you're asking, what can you do immediately? And that is one thing you can look into. You know, the other thing that you can do as more of another short-term measure is to contact your community that's accepting this stuff, and you can ask them to stop. This is complicated. We're doing that here in our community, and there's a lot to consider. But what we want is that's something that we can do right now. We can work within our community to say, stop accepting this stuff and discharging it into our drinking water supplies. Because they're not testing for PFAS. We're not doing that at the wastewater treatment plant. We're not doing that at drinking water plants regularly, so at least. So that's what I have to offer you. And I don't know if the team has more to say about that. Okay.
I guess I would add, and this is not an easy thing to do, but just as this coalition, this team is working at a regional level, people in specific communities can work with local teams. So if you're able to put together a group of concerned community members and start a dialogue with city government and cite this study if you want, but just say, look, we have concerns and we want to begin a conversation that will lead to confidence in our drinking water in our community. There's power in that kind of advocacy, but it's not quick and it takes a sustained effort, which is not a satisfying answer for you, but that's the reality.
Yeah, and I just want to add that we want to be drinking our municipal water. We don't want to be buying bottled water unless it's an emergency. And that's why it's important to really, do what you can locally to help your community protect their drinking water supply. Because municipal drinking water is the safest way to go. And we need to all be a part of the solution in helping to keep it safe and maintain the integrity of it. So thank you for that question. John asks if it's effective to use our form letter or better to write our own. It's really up to you. You can actually, if you're part of a community, you're sitting on a CAC or an ECC or your community group, you can draft your own letter from your body and make the same request. You're welcome to use our language and any way you want to write your letter, and you want to send that to, and this is something we need to, I realize it's not on the form letter, it's to Joseph O'Connell at the DEC, and who is responsible for the solid waste, for the rulemaking. He's the contact at the DEC for the rulemaking, and Sean Mahar, who's the acting or interim commissioner at the DEC. So John, either way, we've done it to make it easy for you, or you can do your own. Thank you. So have any of the proposed regulations addressed the toxic chemicals that are not presently declared due to proprietary claims? Hannah, I don't know if you can answer that question for us.
Yeah, I know that the Toxic Substances Control Act was recently amended a few years ago and has a bit more requirements shifted back towards the industry instead of government. So the proprietary concerns are certainly less than they used to be, but I don't know how that interacts specifically with the leachate issue, because then it's there, once it's in leachate, I don't think that there's a way to identify specifically who it would be coming from. So I don't think that there is a proprietary issue if we could identify specifically what we're looking at.
Thank you, Hannah. So Jennifer asks, how much of the leachate generated at any given wastewater treatment plant leaks into the ground and into any local local groundwater in their location versus the amount that is shipped elsewhere? So in other words, what's happening at the landfill with the leachate in the groundwater or surrounding surface waters versus what's happening at municipal wastewater treatment plants? Jen?
Yeah, I just want to point out, I think it's a typo in this question, but just so it's perfectly clear, the leachate is generated at the landfill and is shipped to the wastewater treatment plant. The wastewater treatment plant is not generating the leachate, but it seems like that's a typo, so just to make sure. If it's an actively operating landfill, it should be a very, very, very low amount of leakage, because those are operating under active permits and there are all sorts of compliance requirements. And if there is a problem, it should be noticed and addressed in good measure. For inactive landfills, it's a very different story, because inactive landfills typically do not have liners and typically do not have leachate containment or control systems. So there is an initiative happening right now in New York. It's been going on since, I believe, 2017, when it was authorized by the legislature. And basically DEC is going one by one through all of the inactive landfills in New York State and is looking to assess whether PFAS, it's PFOA and PFOS, two specific forms of PFAS, and 1,4-dioxane are leaking out of those landfills, and whether those are affecting private or public water supplies. So you can search for that and look up any particular region or area you may be concerned about and find out specifically about the impacts of these inactive landfills on local aquifers. One thing I'll just mention about that initiative is that it appears that this disposal of leachate at wastewater treatment plants is considered to be outside of the scope of what this initiative is doing. So the purpose of it is to protect drinking water in cases where pollution is coming from inactive landfills. But we know that there are a couple of instances where inactive landfills are collecting leachate and disposing of it at wastewater treatment plants. And even after it has been discovered that this leachate contains high levels of PFAS or 1,4-dioxane, that practice isn't being addressed. That transport to the wastewater treatment plant is not being addressed by DEC. So if you do look into this and do investigate these inactive landfills, just do keep in mind that they may be part of this loophole that we're talking about, and it's something to ask about.
Thank you, Jen. The Rocco's is asking that under the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, or RCRA, if the landfill discharges this leachate directly on site or from the site, it's required to remove up to 14 contaminants. What are the 14 contaminants?
So I believe that if they're going to be releasing it themselves, they're going to need a speedies permit, which typically has things like fecal coliform, phosphorus, nitrogen, naturally occurring biological contaminants are what they're going to be looking for.
Thank you. So do we know, so Rocco's asks, do we know if the 4 inactive landfills sending their leachate to Kingston are closed or capped?
They're all capped.
Thank you.
Yeah, and in the report, we have a appendix that lists the names of each of those landfills.
Great. John asks, can you give us a sense of the economic aspect of leachate transfer? For example, does the colony landfill profit from trucking this waste to the colony wastewater treatment plant? Does this save the landfill money? Also, these are a lot of questions, so we can break it down, but I'm going to read it. Also, what about the other side of the equation? Do any of the wastewater treatment plants profit from accepting leachate? Use those funds for routine annual operation? Do they depend on the revenue stream? The example you gave of the 414,000 gallon at the city of Amsterdam in 2023 would suggest, as Lipscomb says, is just about the money. So let's start with, do landfills profit from trucking this waste to wastewater treatment plants? And then does this save the landfill money to truck the leachate away? So let's start there.
You want me to just I can say that the wastewater treatment plants do make money per gallon. On average, from the data we were able to obtain, it's about 3 cents per gallon. In some cases, it wasn't completely clear, but seems as though there may, instead of money exchange, be reciprocal agreements between landfills and wastewater treatment plants, wherein a wastewater treatment plant will dispose of its sludge, so that solid matter that's left over after treatment, at the landfill, and in turn the landfill will dispose of its leachate at the wastewater treatment plant. And that may be just a non-monetary reciprocal thing. So 3 cents per gallon on average. And if you look at the wastewater treatment plants in the study area, the biggest receiver of leachate is Albany North, and that's like in the ballpark of $1 million per year. That's much more than the others, which are around the hundreds of thousands of dollars per year or less. Not everybody supplied us with this information. I just want to caveat that. So we kind of have limited information about the cost. As to where it goes, dependence, that I don't know about.
John, do you have something to add? You're off mute. That's why I'm.
Yeah, I'm just living off mute. But to the person who asked the question, it's got to be cheaper to truck it to wastewater treatment plants than it is to properly treat it on site, or they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. So the answer is yes, it benefits the bottom line of the landfills to get the stuff out in trucks to wastewater treatment plants. As Jen says, the wastewater treatment plants charge a fee to dispose of it, so it makes money for them. But one of the things I think it's worth adding is that, as we've learned here from Hannah and others, this stuff is way too toxic to discharge directly because of the various laws Hannah outlined. You know, Clean Water Act, for example, has thresholds of contaminants above which you're not allowed to discharge, below which you can. I hope that's not oversimplifying, but the problem here is that the leachate is so toxic, the landfill cannot discharge it directly. So what they're doing is they're taking it to the wastewater treatment plants, and something that hasn't been said yet is, I'm not saying that this was a part of the design, it's just one of the considerations that makes this work. The leachate is blended with vast quantities of treated sewage. So now the contaminant thresholds, the contaminants that are too concentrated in full strength leachate, are diluted below regulatory threshold levels. And that's what allows the discharge. So it's those thresholds in the Clean Water Act and in other laws are part of the reason that this kind of sleight of hand works.